Hello guys, and welcome to another Hellfire Citadel Mythic guide. Today we're talking about Fell Lord Zakuun. I'm Roger Brown, and with me as always I have Just Wait.
Hey everyone, Fellord is the patchwork fight of this instance. There's only one boss, and you're going to be handling him and his mechanics all throughout this fight. The setup you want to use for this fight is 2 tanks, 4 healers, and 14 DPS. There's nothing special about it. You can use a mixture of both melee and ranged DPS. There's no really any class specifics that you need for this fight. You just need high DPS and good healing and tanking.
Yeah, so moving on to the abilities of this fight. It's a pretty simple fight. There's very few mechanics, but they're pretty devastating if you mess it up. So the most important thing are the pillars. So the boss is going to cast an ability called Rambling Fissure, which will spawn 5 circles on the ground, 5 green circles, and you need to soak them. If you don't soak them, there will be fell crystals spawning from each and every one of them. The issue is that once you've soaked 4 of them, there will be a fell crystal instantly spawning at the location of the 5th zone on the ground, no matter what you do. So what you need to do is just soak 4 of them and leave the one that is at the best position for the rest of the fight, meaning you want to spawn it at the corner of the room so that it's easier to protect it from the purple waves, which we'll explain in a second. Now the last thing you need to know about these fell crystals is that they do despawn after being up for 3 minutes, so you won't have more than 4 at any given time throughout this fight.
Now just like in Heroic, from soaking these pillars you're going to get a debuff called Latent Energy. Now unlike in Heroic, this debuff is going to be permanent unless you remove it with another new Mythic mechanic that we're going to be explaining later. The Latent Energy debuff will cause you to explode if you come in contact with any of the purple waves, the Wake Up Destruction. So in order not to explode, you need to make sure you avoid the purple waves and you don't stand in any rumbling fissure spawning. Now the boss has 2 phases that it's going to be switching between. The first one is the armed phase and the second one is the disarmed phase. There's also an enraged phase which starts at 30% and will last until the boss is dead. Now in the first phase, the armed phase, the boss will be doing soul cleave, and this has a new mythic mechanic attached to it. Unlike in Heroic and normal mode, not only the tank will go inside the shadow phase, but also up to 4 people will go inside the shadow realm with him.
Now the reason why you want people to go inside the Shadow Realm together with the tank is because you also remove your latent energy debuff by going inside there. So basically the people who soak the Rambling Fissures are the ones who want to go inside to get rid of their debuff so that they can soak again later in the fight. Now as we said, you need 4 people to soak the Rambling Fissures every time, and in each armed phase the boss will cast the Rambling Fissure twice. So you'll need 8 people per armed phase need to soak the Rambling Fissures. Now the way we handled it, because you are only supposed to have 2 of the armed phases, otherwise you're probably not even going to make the DPS check overall, is we had specific groups for each time you need to soak the Rambling Fissures, consisting of 4 players each time. So you need 4 of those groups, 2 for the first armed phase and 2 for the second armed phase. As you can see at the top left corner of the screen, we have the 4 names and we place them in a square basically. And what this means is the top left name is assigned to soak the most top left fissure. Accordingly, the bottom left guy is assigned to soak the one that is closest to the entrance left, and so on and so on. So it's just an assignment to help people coordinate so that you don't have all 4 people trying to soak the same one and then there is panic because you don't know who is going for which one. Now as I mentioned, there are specific patterns for these fissures, so each group should get accustomed to them and everyone should know who is soaking what after a few tries on this boss. Now the important thing is to know as fast as possible which of the fissures you are not gonna soak. Ideally this needs to be the one that is as far to the corner of the room as possible, and you want them as gathered as possible as well. So you want the second pillar to spawn close to the first one in order to make it easier to protect all of them at the same time. Now to have this information as fast as possible given to the soakers, you should have one of the players, ideally the raid leader, mark on the ground with a ground marker the fissure which is not going to be soaked. We use the macro to mark the ground as fast as possible, which you can see on the screen. You can use this one or any other assignment you want, but this worked really well for us.
Now those people that have been assigned in each group and are soaking the rumbling fissures and getting their latent energy buffs, as mentioned, they need to go inside together with the tank on the soul cleave. Now what we did for this inside phase and the groups going in is that we only had the first 2 groups going inside. Now the reason we only sent in these 2 groups is that because the boss will die fast enough so the last 2 groups do not need to reset, since the first 2 groups can soak again. And also that because every time they come out, they'll be shooting wakes of destruction out and the inside phase they're going to be leaving residual energy orbs inside, which also are going to be shooting Wakes of Destruction, making the inside phase harder later on. Now once these groups go inside, they have to dodge Wakes of Destruction and Ring of Destructions coming from the residual energy orbs. There's only going to be Ring of Destructions for the second group and for the tanks later on, so they're going to have to jump over a ring that's going to be expanding outwards from an orb. It's really easy to jump, so as soon as you see the ring, get ready to jump over it. Now while you're jumping over these Rings of Destruction, you also have to dodge the Wakes of Destruction. Luckily the first group is only going to be having one orb, and the second group is of course going to have more orbs, but these orbs are going to be on the other side of the room. Now while dodging all the stuff inside, you also need to get in position to go outside again to leave behind your residual energy orb on the correct place. Now both groups, Group 1 and Group 2, each have their individual assigned positions where they're going to leave the Shadow Realm and come back upside. These assigned positions are there to avoid instant-gipping other players with your waves that you shoot out when you come outside, and also to help the second group, once they go inside, to avoid the Wakes of Destruction from the residual energy orbs that you are going to be leaving behind once you go up. The first group going inside is going to be leaving the room on the right side. As you can see in this picture, we have assigned the numbers 1 through 5, and each player is being given a number. And then once you leave the realm, you're going to be going onto your position, and once you go outside, you can just move back to the raid. Now for the second group going in, the first group has of course left behind these orbs that are going to be shooting Wakes of Destruction, but one orb, as mentioned, also going to shoot a Ring of Destruction that you have to jump over. Now because of these Wakes of Destruction and the ring, the second group will be leaving the realm on the left side of the room instead of the right side. Now the third and fourth time the boss is casting Soak Leaf on the tank, only the tank will go inside, and they have to make sure that they leave the Shadow Realm in a position where there's no pillars near, but also not anyone from the raid or the boss, as they might shoot people with the wave and kill them, because they might have latent energy debuff. It's good to communicate where you're leaving the realm, so the raid actually knows where you are going to come out and people can adjust their positioning if needed. Now for the first two groups, once they leave the realm, they're also going to be afflicted by Exhaust Soul. This means they cannot soak any rumbling fissures for 2.5 minutes. So you just need to wait until the debuff has run out before you can soak any pillars again. This shouldn't be an issue as we have 2 more groups assigned to soak these pillars before it's their turn again.
Now the boss will cast 2 more abilities in the armed phase. The first one being Cavitation, which will spawn the Wakes of Destructions, the purple waves, towards the ranged players of the group. And the way we handled it is having all the ranged players stand in the same line towards the boss, so that all of the waves would spawn in the same specific line, and then we had a mage or a monk stand in front of all the ranged players and soak all of those waves by using Evanescence or Diffuse Magic. That way you don't have to think about this ability at all, you will just soak all of them instantly, and that's it. Now the second ability and the last one in this phase is the Befouled. Now this is just a debuff that he will give to random players, and it will absorb healing. Once it has absorbed all of the healing, the player will blow up around him, and basically what you have to do is just move out of the group, get healed, explode, and then move back in, and that's it. This is especially important for the melees. You do not want to blow up in the melee, and also the people who are going inside because they have soaked the fissure and then they want to go in the Shadow Realm. You need to really fast blow them up so that they don't go inside that phase with that debuff, or that they don't explode right when they are gathered up next to the tank. So that's the only hard part about this ability.
After 1 minute and 25 seconds into the fight, the boss will leave the first phase and will enter the Disarmed phase. Now this phase will last for 36 seconds, and the boss is going to be throwing away his weapon, and he's going to be attacking the raid while disarmed. His weapon, while on the ground, will cause fell explosions, dealing damage every 3 seconds for around 90k, so this is the healer's job to just keep the raid up while this is happening. The boss itself will be getting heavy-handed, which means that whoever he is striking, he's also going to be hitting the closest target. This is the exact same buff they used on the Butcher fight, so I'm guessing they just copied the ability.
Yeah, so the only important thing is to have the 2 tanks stand on top of each other and not have any melee by mistake stand anywhere close, because then he's just gonna die. Remember, all of the previous abilities that we mentioned do not happen in this phase. The only things that happen are the fell explosions from the weapon, the heavy-handed, and then the last ability, which is the Seeds of Corruption, which can get pretty messy. Now, what this ability does is it picks 5 random players and it gives them a Seed of Destruction. And what happens is they have a few seconds to move away from the raid and away from the pillars, and once the debuff expires, they shoot waves of destruction all around them. The same way that the players who go in the Shadow Realm throw them when they come out. Now, the important thing with the seeds, just like with the people who go inside the Shadow Realm, is that you don't want to stand right next to each other, because then you'll just blow each other up. So what we did to handle this is we marked 5 ground markers, and the 5 people who get the seeds, we use the weak aura to give them the assigned mark, which corresponds to the ground marker. And the 5 people just ran to their mark, exploded, and then moved back in the raid. Because there will be a lot of these waves coming towards the raid and the pillars, and there are people who will have the latent energy debuff, which means if they get hit, they will explode to the whole raid. You want to use some of your players to protect the rest of the raid. The ideal candidates to do this job are the hunters using the deterrence, because they take no damage while soaking these waves. Also the mages with evanescence, just like we did with cavitations. And then lastly, for the melees, you can use the rogues. I mean, they're rogues, they use feint, and they can take a lot of them. Just make sure that none of these waves actually reach the raid, because if you get even 2 of the explosions going through, it's gonna get really messy. And now, apart from the people who have the latent energy and they explode if they touch one of those waves, there are also the pillars, which we mentioned you need to protect from the waves as well. So, because you cannot determine exactly where the pillars are gonna spawn, what we did is we had the boss close to some of the pillars, and the rogues were in charge to soak all the waves going towards those pillars. And then, if we had some other pillars a little bit further away, that was the ranged group's duty to soak the waves going towards those pillars and protect them, meaning the hunters and the mages. But even apart from those people who are designated soakers and protectors, anyone from the raid can also chip in and take one of those waves if they see them moving towards a pillar and it's not being soaked, because you're gonna save a lot of damage taken by just soaking one of them.
Yeah, anyone soaking these Wakes of Destruction does need to make sure that they do not have the latent energy debuff, because if you try to soak it with the latent energy debuff, you're just going to blow up and you're still going to wipe the raid. Now once the boss reaches 30% health, which should be after or during the second disarm phase, he will enter the last and enraged phase. Now this phase is where you're going to use Bloodlust and all your personal and own cooldowns that you have saved up for it. If you have any 5-minute cooldowns, make sure you don't use them on the pull and save them for this phase, because the fight is not that long. And once this phase starts, the boss will pick up his weapon if he's in the disarmed phase, or just gain his heavily armed buff right away, which is the same buff as the heavy-handed, except it just has a different name this time.
Now, as you might have guessed, this is an enraged phase. The boss goes absolutely nuts and starts doing all of the abilities from both the armed and disarmed phase, with the small exception of the Soul Cleave. He does not actually do that in the last phase. The bad news is that he casts his abilities way faster. So for example, the Seeds of Corruption, you have less time to react to it, so you need to be really fast. So it might be a good idea to use your Stampeding Roars when you get those seeds, because there's going to be a lot of people with the latent energy debuffs, and there are going to be a lot of pillars, so you need to get those seeds away from the raid as far as possible in a very short period of time. Now, because you're using Bloodlust and all your DPS cooldowns, the boss is going to die really fast in this phase, so you're only going to get the Seeds of Corruption twice, and you're also going to get the Rumbling Fissures twice. Depending on how the boss's HP is, you probably only need to soak the Rumbling Fissure once, which is at the start of the phase. As soon as he enters the phase, he'll cast it immediately, just like in the armed phase. So this time, it's the group 1 from the assignments who needs to soak again, because their debuff is going to be expired, so they can actually soak again. And because everyone else has soaked already, these are the only people who are available to soak.
Yeah, if you see the boss being low enough to ignore the last wave of Rumbling Fissures, which is around 10 to 15%, you don't have to soak them anymore, because the boss will die before the pillars even spawn. And then even after that, you actually need to get seeds or a cavitation before you die from them. Now, one more very important thing for this last phase is that if anyone with a latent energy debuff gets the seed debuff, they need to make sure they're not near anyone else with the seed debuff, because if they blow up on top of each other, for example, they're going to instantly blow up for 5 times the unleashed energy explosions, and you don't want it to happen. They really need to make sure that they're away from others and avoid any Wakes of Destruction to not wipe the raid.
And that's all you need to know about this fight. Now moving on to just a couple of tips and tricks. There's not too many because the fight is pretty straightforward. Firstly, because the fight is pretty stable at the start of it, what we did, which helps a bit with the DPS, is we had on the first group of soakers for the Rumbling Fissures, the pillars, we actually used the tank to soak there, so that one of the DPSers can stay outside and keep nuking the boss, while the tank goes inside, which he does regardless from the Soul Cleave, so we just had him also soak one of the pillars on the ground. And now the second and last tip is the people who do go inside, and specifically when the tanks go inside by themselves towards the end of the fight, they need to make sure to not spawn the waves of distraction close to the raid, or at least make sure that you call it out when you're about to go outside of the Shadow Realm so that there are people ready to soak those waves and protect the pillars.
Now there's a couple of debuffs the raid wants to keep track of. First debuff is Latent Energy. These are the debuffs you gain from soaking the rumbling fissures, and you'll be causing unleashed energy if you come in contact with any wakes of destruction or stand in another rumbling fissure while still afflicted by it. Second debuff is Disembodied. This is the debuff you will be having while you're inside the zone, and tracking this will give you a good indicator of when you are leaving the zone again and when you need to be in position to shoot out your waves once you leave the Shadow Realm.
Then the third debuff is Befouled. As we mentioned, it's a pretty easy debuff. You just need to move outside, get healed, which gets absorbed, and then blow up without damaging anyone near you. And the last and most important debuff are the Seeds of Destruction. Now you want to make sure that you know instantly when you get these debuffs, maybe have a sound when you get them, and move as fast as possible away from the raid, maybe using a Stampeding Roar as well every time the raid gets these debuffs, and go to your assigned location or at least far away so that you don't spawn those waves of destruction anywhere close to players or pillars.
And this brings us to the end of the Mythic Fellowed Zakuun guide. We hope you can get this patchwork fight down pretty fast. It's quite straightforward with not many abilities, but you do need to handle them good because one fuck up will mean a wipe most of the time.
Yeah, make sure you get your maximum DPS spec and try to beat all of your fellow raiders on the DPS meter. Also, you're probably gonna fight over who goes inside because obviously the people who go in the Shadow Realm do less DPS. So make sure if you're seeing this guide that you get yourself in those third or fourth groups if you want to max the dips. And remember to like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more Hellfire Citadel Mythic guides. And we wish you good luck.
And see you next time.